Hello and welcome, everybody. It is Thursday night, so it is time once again for the Tank Show, where we try and spend some time acquiring new knowledge. I do have back with me this week my buddy, pal, and co-host Chattanooga Ed. Ed, thank you for being here as always. I hope you had a blast at the Keystone Clash this past weekend.
I did, but boy, it was a bummer missing out on going early last week. That would have been a whole lot of fun. Darn it.
Yeah, it was a good show. But I know that you were having a lot of fun up there, and just do what we got to do to keeping on with the show. It's great to see everybody in here. Before we even got started, Pega's sister Rena using her membership milestone super chat, saying, "Yay, I got to renew," and big news in a separate post. Which thank you for the membership renewal, Rena, and congrats on that big news, which is she did sign the lease for a house, and she's going to be doing a tour Tuesday on her channel. She's going to be doing a tour of the new house, and I'm sure talking about where she's going to set up some fish tanks more than likely and what she might be setting up. And then our buddy Rico Stan with the $5 super chat. Thank you so much, Rico. Said, missed you at the Clash. I'm sorry I was not able to attend. It looked like it might work out at the last second, and then it was just like, no, that's not going to be a possibility. But we do have Aquashella Chicago, of course, coming up next weekend, which means that we've only got realistically a couple of days before Ed and I head out of town to head up that way and get ready to prep and set up and do stuff up there. But I did want to mention for anybody that maybe missed it in the KG Tropical stream, if you've got VIP tickets for Aquashella Chicago, Friday they are doing a meet and greet that evening. I think it's 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. For all the VIP ticket holders to come hang out with all the creators. So I wanted to share that because I thought that was really cool. Of course, we will be hanging out there, and then, the important people like John and I'm sure Tanner and whoever else is already in town at that point. So that'll be fun, and they'll have some snacks or hors d'oeuvres, as John said.
I might break out a board game.
Heck yeah.
A silly game that anybody can play, and if anybody's there that wants to play, we can play.
I think it'll be fun. There's, of course, you've got other side of the country. You've got Fishtoberfest coming up, so that'll be an awesome thing. Hopefully, maybe next year we can get to attend that one. But good old Danikin Aquatics, Kenny E., he puts on a great show with Fishtoberfest. So I would encourage you, if you're on that side of the country, out there in the Portland area, to go check that out if maybe you can't make it across to the East Coast to the Chicago Aquashella. And hello and welcome to the KG Tropicals viewers. Wow, words are really hard tonight. Appreciate you all coming over, and appreciate John and Lisa for the send over, the usual. Thank you all for that very much. Good old keepfishkeeping.com. For anybody that's coming in that's new and doesn't know how it works, if you have a question or comment you would like for us to read live on the air, if you'll put the @ symbol and then Fish from Fever, that highlights on my screen, makes it stick out from the chat because things can get a little wild and crazy sometimes. So that just helps it show up to me a little bit better, and then we can address those. Case in point, we had some people saying hello. There we go. Select Pet said, any chance you or Chattanooga Ed will be in Nashville Saturday? I'm heading down for the first Nashville Club meeting. I will not be at that.
Oh, sorry. You go first.
No, you're good. No, that's what I was just saying. I won't be there, but Ed is going to try.
Yeah, I can't guarantee. My car. Okay, so I wasn't able to go to Rusty Wessel's house because my car was in the shop. And they still had it going into the day that I had to leave to go to the the Clash. So they had to snap the steering wheel back together. And they said, well, we're waiting for a part to come in, but we'll have it for you this week on Wednesday. So I drove my car up there, and they said, well, we didn't order the part. Bring it in on Monday. So I still have a crummy steering wheel now. And so my car's worse. And it still hasn't been fixed. So, but I don't think I want to let a crummy steering wheel hold me back from going to Nashville. But I have to see if I have family commitments. Sorry.
Absolutely. No, you're fine, buddy. See some of the highlighted stuff coming out of the chat. Vision Tactic saying hello. Sky Dancer, hello. Good to see you. Matt's Aquatic says, no, I spent all day making this video and filming just to accidentally delete everything, and a bunch of crying emojis.
Oh,
Matt, I am sorry to hear that. I've done that at least once, or I've had data that didn't transfer over and got corrupted. So my condolences on that. I know that is always rough, but it is definitely one of those things that you learn from that experience. Kind of like with fish keeping, you learn from it and you just try not to repeat prior mistakes. So just shoot it again, do it better, and make up for the fact that you're having to do it over again. That's all I can really suggest on that one.
What I do is I make a copy of every single thing that I'm videotaping that I want to keep, because I don't ever do any editing on the original film. So that way I've always got the original to fall back on. And because sometimes when I edit, I accidentally take the good part out and I leave the crummy part or something. And so, yeah, I've learned that hard way that way too. So I always make backup copies.
Absolutely. That's not a bad idea, especially if you have storage capacity for it. I've got, without backup copies on a lot of stuff, I've got 500 gigabytes of a lot of video and stuff. And so you can run into space issues after a while. All right. Again, because I mentioned it right before everybody actually joined. But if you're joining for the first time, you have a question or comment you'd like for us to read live on the air, if you'll put the @ symbol and then Fish Room Fever, that will highlight on my screen, and we'd be happy to address those live in the chat on the stream. Lefty3213A using that membership milestone super chat says, I figured I'd have one of these. Haha. Been a member 29 months. Thank you so much for that, Lefty. Always good to see you. And I hear I get to see you next week, potentially, at Chicago Aquashella. I'm looking forward to hanging out with you again.
That's almost 2.5 years.
Yeah, it's amazing how time flies.
You should bring a bag of candy kisses and give them to all your fans.
Give kisses to all my fans. Yep.
Yeah. Well, I just really feel like a chocolate kiss right now.
There we go. We could do something like that. Who knows? I do like doing fun little shenanigans and things like that. So that's a good idea. Pegasus Arena saying hello and saying Ed shaved.
I did.
So Ken's 3Ds and Aquatics is down in Jacksonville, Florida. Apparently Ken's hometown, as well as my hometown from back in the day. I was asking if I know any place to wild collect freshwater fish. I honestly don't. I moved up from Jacksonville to Tennessee when I was 13 or 14. It's been some years since I've actually lived in the area, and I can't really off the top of my head go, hey, try these places. I know we used to do a lot of stuff like that, but it was not places that I could be like, oh, it was on the corner of this and that. It was just kind of vague memories of this random spot that we knew about type of thing. But more than likely, we probably got somebody hanging out here, 172 people that either knows someone in the area that could recommend something, or maybe could recommend something themselves. But I unfortunately don't remember any specific places. But I wish I could be there with you, because I know that'd be fun.
I wonder if there's any way to look up legal fishing holes or legal fishing places, and anywhere you can legally fish, you can catch or collect.
There may be. That's a good point. It does seem like in Florida that just about most drainage areas, retaining ponds, you never know really to find stuff. That's one of the joys that I've found with Florida specifically in collecting, is if there's a body of water, you've got a good probability that there's going to be something there that you could get in and collect. So never hurts to, if you see a place, and of course you can legally go there and do it, to give a place a shot, even if you're like, I don't know about that. But
you know what, with the hurricane going on down there, you may not be able to do it. When were they talking about doing it? Because everything's overly flooded right now.
Yeah. Ken's going to be down there for about a month, if I remember correctly. So should have some time in there to be able to do it. Michael Long and the Long Family Show saying hello to Fisherman Fever, Ed, and I'm sure everybody else. Hello, Michael. Good to see you. Scuba Steve-O's Aquatic saying, hey, James and Ed, my favorite YouTubers. Thank you, Scuba Steve-O. The best buddy. Always good to see you. And then he followed that up using his membership milestone super chat, saying, love these guys. Been a member for 6 months on the Snowball team. Thank you so much, Scuba Steve-O. Hope I get to hang out with you again soon. It was good to see you at the Clash. And again, congrats on your victory there with showing your fish at that.
Oh, speaking of the Clash, did you know that you and I made the magazine?
No, I didn't. I wasn't there.
Well, Amazon today. You and I are in here. Would you like me to show you? Yes.
Did you get me a copy? I'm going to have to find a copy.
They just mailed this to me today. But yeah, they kind of featured us in this group shot. We're over here.
Okay.
Kenny's behind us.
Made it.
You can see a piece of Maria Z. You can like see her ear or something. And Degenerate's head. It's pretty cool. Bentley's sitting behind us about 4 rows back.
That's awesome. As featured in Amazonas magazine.
Very cool.
Gotta love it.
Big Trim would like to know this year.
Heck yeah. That is awesome, buddy. Very awesome. Big Trim wants to know if I do vinegar eels. Yes, I've got culture right here, actually. One of many, now that I've stirred it up. Ooh. I promise this is vinegar eels and not the bottle I use when I'm editing for too long.
Now, do you put apple at the bottom?
I do put apple at the bottom. You can get by without it, but I find that it does kind of add to the longevity of it. So if you're going to make a culture, you're going to make multiples. So like I like to hack up, so I love redundancy, particularly on my live food cultures. So I've got a couple gallons worth of cultures. And you can leave that sit for, in theory, up to a year and then come back to it. And you're still going to have some in there where you could refresh and really get it heavily populated. It's not going to be booming at a year, but it is still viable enough to have some to, kick back up if you lost all your other cultures. And I do the same with the micro worms, which actually have micro banana and the Walter worms, which you really don't need all three. They're so close to each other, but I have backups of all of those. So anytime I get a starter culture, split that up into several, and then I'll expand it out. So maybe I've got, I do, get a culture and I do 3 cultures from that, and then the next time I'll double it and do 6. Just that way I've got a good rotation because I feed a lot of live foods, and 2, I've got backups. Then I've, the last club meeting, the East Tennessee Aquatic Association, I took some cultures to that and gave them away for the little after club raffle. And it's like, Ed, if you want some cultures, let me know. It's always great when you've got live food cultures to get them into the hands of some buddies, just in case maybe even my backup, goes out. Or let's say when I'm moving, something happens and I lose all my cultures, in a couple weeks. It's nice to have some friends that you can, hey, can I get a starter of that and be able to kick things off again? But yeah, one of the main reasons I like having multiple types of live foods is because they do not just have different, nutritional contents, but they also have different specifications for what they work well for. So your vinegar eels, when you feed those, vinegar eels will constantly swim up at the surface. So if you've got something like maybe some rainbows or something that's a top feeding fish that won't bother to go down to the bottom, the vinegar eels work great. If you've got something like baby cories or bottom dwellers, your microworms and those other nematodes work really well because they'll sink down to the bottom there and those things can get to them. So it's nice to have A, the variety, and B, the option to feed wherever in the water column you're trying to get the food. All right, let me roll through. Oop, there we go. I knew it was going to move around on me. Scroll back up here. Scrolling and rolling. All right, as far back up as I can get is to Leslie Perry. So if it was in between the last one I read and Leslie's at 9:36 p.m. Eastern time, I apologize. YouTube has stolen away from me. It says, how do I know almond leaf in my betta tank? So you'll start to see with any of your organics, and this even goes, as far as driftwood, though usually with driftwood, it's a much longer period of time. But any organics that you put into the tank, you'll notice a physical deterioration of those things. Now, if you're doing it specifically for, the tannins and those active properties of a fresh catop leaf or a fresh almond leaf, then it's kind of going to depend on your water change schedule and just how big of a leaf you're using, how much tannin are you putting in, how much tannin are you taking out, with how many water changes at what volume every week. So there are a lot of variables. Yeah, but it's not something that there's not like a set parameter, I guess is the best way to put it. So it's not going to adversely affect if your tannins get a little bit lower before you switch that out. But I find in general that I keep a lot of Indian almond leaves on hand, and so it's not a big deal for me to switch those out regularly. If I'm doing water changes and I start to notice I'm not getting tannins that I want, just throw one in. Now, if you're just throwing one in there for, like, say, the biofilm development, like in a shrimp tank, a lot of times, which I know you said it's a betta tank, but in a shrimp tank, I'll leave those in there until they're pretty much completely degraded and then add a new one, because, the fish are constantly eating at the microorganisms and all that stuff. That leaf is breaking down, but I'm not throwing it in there as much for the tannins aspect as I am for the breakdown of that organic matter and allowing it to feed other organisms in the tank. So sorry, that's kind of a long non-answer, but I guess for a betta, the big thing would be look at how much it's producing tannin, test. Is it still affecting your pH? And if it stopped affecting your pH, that would be a good indicator that if you're using it for buffering that down, that it's time to have or add a new Indian almond leaf. Do you have anything you wanted to add on that before I moved on here?
Nope, I agreed with your tannins.
I'm going to let you answer this one first. I haven't read it yet, but I see Guppy question. Nadia says, Guppy question, thinking of moving some from a 6-ish pH to a 9-ish pH. Bad idea, question mark. How to do it safely.
Wow, that's like huge swing. They're going to like the 9 better than the 6. You're going to see more fry, even though that's almost too hard. What I would do is that's so hard. Normally, like if it was 6 to 7, I wouldn't freak out too bad. But from 6 to 9, I'd probably put them in a 5-gallon bucket and just add like a couple cups of the hard, like put half a gallon of soft water that they've been in, and then add a cup or hard water every half hour and slowly bring it up. That's how I do it when I get like some fish from somebody else that's from super soft water. But there's the whole drip acclimate ability, thing. But I just prefer to take a whole cup of water and just slowly do it till it's full. And then I normally don't have any problems. Well, I've never had any problems with doing it that way. How about you?
Yeah, that's pretty much the same way. It's the same premise as if I'm wanting to. So when I take my zebra plecos, I'm actually going to be setting them up for breeding at the new house in that setup. And I will actually be bringing the water down more to breeding parameters versus just living parameters, because they're happy and healthy, but they're not going to more than likely breed as successfully where they're at. And then you can run into other egg development issues, but that's a whole other story. But it's the same premise as if I was bringing something from a higher to a lower. I would go pretty much with what Ed said. It's the same method. I just do it kind of differently, I guess, whereas I might put them in a tank. And then I might cut, I'd have them in, let's say you've got a 10-gallon tank. I'd put 8 gallons of their 6-ish pH in there, and then add a couple gallons of the 9, and then give them a couple days. And then I'd do like a 50-50 cut to adapt them over. But fish are relatively hardy, and they tend to be a lot more hardy than what we give them credit for. So as long as you're doing some sort of acclimation, they should be fine. In theory, if it's a really strong line, because there's always a variable, and always some say, well, you could just take them and move them over. Maybe you could. I don't know that strain well enough. I don't know the lineage of the fish she's got well enough. Some you could. I had a heater malfunction a while back, and the tank got up to 93 or 94 degrees, and the guppies all survived. Would I say that you could heat any guppy up to 93 or 4? No. And in fact, kill a lot of them, but that particular strain did fine on that extreme, thank goodness. But I always try to play with any advice I give. What I call fair use, fair USE. Is it a universally safe example? So is it fair to say that if I give this information, that should work for pretty much anybody that's listening to it? So that counts out a lot of the extremes or specifics, but it's something that I feel, in my experience and observations, is safe. So I would just, go with, like Ed said, and like I mentioned, kind of adapt them, give them some time to transition over between those two pH differences, and you should be good. But I wouldn't super stress about it. I wouldn't necessarily worry about a drip acclimation personally, but as safe as you want to be would be fine. The only place where I feel like you really run into a potential issue is if you try and do too much too quickly, then you could see some negative effects from that.
Yeah,
that's Aquatic says. Sorry, go ahead.
They were like going from RO water to concrete. It's just some big swings. So let's hear what Matt has to say.
Let's see. Matt has to say, I film on my phone with low storage, so it's hard to keep backups, and I had to drive to a store too. The reason I was deleting all the extras and accidentally deleted the original. Yeah, that I've been there, done that. That stinks. One thing I will say is, I'm not anybody that knows me and has asked questions about YouTube stuff. Which, by the way, side note, the member streams on Sundays, those are a great place to talk YouTube-y type stuff, because I know we get some questions here and there in the regular fish chat. And we don't talk that stuff a whole lot anymore, but the Sunday streams for the members only, 2 p.m. Eastern time, that's a great place to talk that kind of stuff. And it's pretty much open season in there. I still really don't do religion and politics and that type of stuff, but it's more open than just fish talk. And you're already a member, which is another reason I say that, not trying to sell you on anything, Matt. But I don't typically advise, hey, go spend a bunch of money and stuff. But that is one thing I would say is if you are having something that's holding you back, so case in point storage, it may be one of those things where you spend a little bit of money and get a cheap storage device, get something that you could move some footage onto. And by the cord that you can transfer over the stuff. So that's one of those things that, you don't have to go expensive. You don't have to go fancy. It doesn't have to be a huge storage device, but you could get something relatively cheap to give you some extra space. I'd say within the $20 or $30 range. And usually when it's, people in the fish keeping hobby, 20 or 30 bucks is something we kind of have in our fish budget anyways. So maybe you could transition that over from the fish budget to the YouTube fish tube filming budget for, out of one of your weeks or a month or something like that. Lefty 32138 says, no, potentially about it. I will be there, Fish Room Fever. I'm glad to hear that, Lefty, and I'm glad we get to see you again and hang out. The Zen Ginger, thank you. Miss Moderator there says, please tag at Fish Room Fever with your questions or comments to highlight it for James. Yes, I'm not a smart man, but I can see the bright orange box when it pops up and read that stuff accordingly. Stephen P. 2003 Aquatics, been a member for 13 months on Team Snowball, says, how long does say I member? 13 months, my friend. It's very much appreciated. All the love and support. I thank you guys for. And again, members, I know it's fairly recently that we've started it back up, but just a reminder, Sundays, come hang out. We got 100 or so members, so we could have a pretty good time hanging out in there. And then when Aquarium Co-op does do his Sunday streams, we always head over and do the send aid. So that's always fun to raid in there with a random funny hashtag. Laura says, we have several electric blue Acaras and recently separated the boys from the girls. Will girls still lay eggs without boys in the tank? So I've not had EBA specifically do it. I've had electric blues before, but I've never done a separation thing. So I honestly can't say with that specific fish. I know that things like you can have angelfish, which again, your cichlids, you can have angelfish that, a female will lay with another female and they'll produce babies. But at the same time, you have some things like some egg scatters. So like your zebra danios. A lot of times, if you've just got females or you don't have them set up somewhere where they're going to breed, they will end up holding eggs, and then you can have some eggs that are not viable for the first batch or two, and they do lay or scatter. Technically, the Danios scatter, but I've not honestly done EBAs separated with just females to know if they will try to lay. So that wouldn't surprise me. I feel like, again, told you what my experience or lack thereof is with the specific fish, but I feel like going off of other fish that are similarly related, that you do have a likely that they could just lay some eggs. Because angels are very well known to do that. You get females that quote unquote pair up, and then they lay, and people are going, well, why aren't my eggs ever fertilized? And then you look at the papilla or the their lovely boy and girl parts when they are laying. You go, oh, well, you've got two males there. That's why you're never getting fertilized eggs. Again, thousands of people in the chat right now, which is one of the great things about hanging out with you all every Thursday, is I would not be surprised if somebody in the chat has actually already answered that has specific experience with that. Over to Ed for any add-ons he's got there.
No, I just thought that was really interesting. Like my experience with angels laying eggs is he was totally right. I had two different pairs, and the males died on both sets, and now the females take turns laying eggs. So if you didn't know that they were both females, you'd think that you're in business. But, they just never fertilized because it's just two girls. But they're happy, so I'm just leaving them alone.
Yeah, and I would say you're probably not going to see it unless it's for a long time, because that's actually something you do with a lot of like egg scatterers. And I think also some egg layers as well, is if you want to get some really good drops of eggs from them, you'll separate out the males from the females. You'll keep them separately so they do accumulate that mass of eggs, so that when they do spawn, you get a couple hundred versus a couple dozen. So, but if you left them in long term, you may be a different story after a year versus after a month or something like that.
I'm actually afraid that. Oh, sorry. I had lag. I had lag, and you weren't talking for a second. But I'm afraid to add a boy to the dynamic, because I'm afraid that they'll turn on one of the girls, and then she'll be lonely.
It's possible. That's possible. Yeah, and it's hard to tell, especially with angels. I found they can have such specific personalities just based on the individual fish. But yeah, it's the only way you could know is to try it and plan for the worst and hope for the best. Our buddy Hip Hop Hillbilly would. Oh yeah, sorry,
guys.
See, this is what happens, and
I'm getting new internet, and right now it's really choppy tonight, so I apologize, folks.
Oh, you're good. I was going to say, because we worked together last month, we just haven't synced back up yet, or last week, I mean. But our friend Hip Hop Hillbilly says, how long is too long before water changes if nitrates stay low? It's been a month, and my nitrates are just now reading 30-ish parts per million. Not quite the shade of 40 ppm on the API chart. Do you want to take this one first, since I've done a good bit of talking tonight?
Sure. If your water is good, you don't have to do water changes necessarily. I do them, though, for my plants also, because the plants love getting new water in. Like, I don't know if you've ever noticed, James, but when I do a water change, I'll get pearling action going on, just because I don't know if it's the new minerals in the water or what, or just, you're also adding oxygen to your water when you're doing water changes. So it's more than just taking the old water out. It adds a lot of good stuff to the tank. So I still try to do even my heavily planted tanks once a month, just for the plants, even if the water seems pretty good.
Absolutely. So yeah, you touched on a couple different things there that I 100% agree on. Even if our parameters aren't reading where we might require a water change for the health of our fish, there are definitely some benefits to changing water, like you mentioned, the re-addition of minerals and things like that. Another thing that I look at typically when I am looking at nitrates, which this is kind of the game that we fall into when we read TDS, and people go, "Oh my God, my TDS is this." But yeah, but what is it composed of? Um, if I've got nitrates, so if I read, say, this tank, and I read my nitrates were 30 parts per million, I would know that my nitrates are probably on a downswing, because I normally will shoot for about 40 parts per million nitrates in my heavily planted tank. But that nitrate is derived from fertilizer. It's not a bare tank that initially had 0 nitrate that has built up to 40 nitrate and it doesn't have plants absorbing things. So that's another part. If we both touched on having plants, do you need to do a water change? Not necessarily. That being said, if it goes for long periods, you can get into what you've heard referred to as old tank syndrome, and you can actually have pH starts to become unstable and can drop. You lose your KH, your carbon hardness, your GH, your general hardness, things like that. So there are other factors that come into play. But if everything's looking happy, looking healthy, that could be one of those, hey, I only change water once a month because that's when it gets up to, 30, 40 parts per million. Or you decide, I do want to change it more often because I do want to get the additional minerals into this mildly or heavily planted tank, and kind of re-up that. It depends on the general setup. But I mean, there are tanks, you could set up a tank that could go months and months and months without a water change, just depending upon what you're trying to do, what you've got in it, and where the nitrates are coming from and how they're being disposed of in that cycle, in that biological system. Yeah, I wouldn't stress over it at all. I wouldn't, and I find that's one of the problems is we often, and John likes to speak this a lot too, we often create problems for ourselves in the hobby. It's like, well, I heard, and I think he did a video on this recently. You have to do it this way. You have to change your water once a week, or you have to change your water every 2 weeks. If you don't, it's bad for your fish. No, I mean, I've got, at this point, most of my tanks are down for the move, but I've still got 15, 18 tanks up, and most of those are not the same. Now, do I run them a lot on the same cycle? So like everything in this room will get multiple water changes every week. Yes, I do that because I feed 5 to 6 times a day, and they are all set up for breeding and heavy fry growth. But they still have their variances. This is a 25-gallon cube that has 2 fish. They're only this big. The one next to it is a 25-gallon cube that has about 60 fish, which are guppies. So the parents are like that, and the 2 batches of juveniles like that. They're not going to have the same parameters running the same time. The tank with 2 fish, I could probably go a month, 2 months, however long. I've got a bunch of Anubias in there and some Anubias Nana. So I've got some plants to do some work. Whereas if I left this other tank, I forget I'm not on the wide layout this week. The other tank that's got 60 plus fish in it for 2 months, feeding 5-6 times a day, constantly having more fry drop in that, it's just going to crash that tank out really quick. So always take into consideration, there are some, again, fair use, there's some universally safe examples, but take into consideration what your personal variance is, what you're doing, what you've got going on, and how the basic or general information comes into play with what you're working. I guess is the best way to put that. Rico Stan uses that membership milestone super chat. Rico, which Rico is going to be hanging out with Ed and myself. And do we have anybody else tonight? And Skipper on the Chattanooga Ed show here in about 25 minutes. So stay tuned for that. But using the membership milestone super chat, been a member for 26 months on Team Snowball. Huge thank you for all your love and support. My friend says, I thought I joined in June 2 years ago, but this says 25 months. Is it still bugged? I guess so, because on the one you actually did, it says 26 months. So YouTube's messing with you. But again, very much appreciate it. Helix says, look for any tips on my 65-gallon with 6 mbunas, a peacock, 8 giant danios, 5 rainbow fish. My smaller mbunas get nipped sometimes, but overall going well. Besides, peacocks are all juvenile. Any tips? I mean, there's not a specific in there. The big thing, you said there's a little bit of nipping, but overall it's going well. So I guess the biggest tip would be, unless you have something specific you would want answered, my biggest tip would just be to continue on with what you're doing, but make sure you're taking the time to observe as things age out, as fish mature. Sometimes behaviors can change. As a fish gets more size on, it might get a little bit more aggressive. Or as things mature out, you find out I've got, some males and females, or I thought maybe I had all of one sex or the other. So then you get some aggressive behavior from some attempted breeding. So the biggest thing would be to keep on with what you're doing, but make sure that you're continuing to observe on a regular basis for any changes in the variables that you have at play. You said they're getting nipped sometimes. I think that's probably going to happen with the setup you've got. Yeah, I think that, yeah, you're probably going to get some nipping. Now, what you could do is you could add some extra break points, some extra line of sight breaks to give places where, the fish can kind of get away from that other fish that's, aggressive or that's looking at them. You could try to potentially feed a little bit more, but then you, of course, have to watch water parameters. Sometimes the fatter fishes, the less aggressive they are. They're just kind of, okay, I'm full and I'm doing my thing. I've even gone as far as to add power heads into a lot of tanks to add some high flow areas, but you need to make sure that it's not just swirling the whole tank. It just needs to be a certain area that's got high flow, but you've got resting points in other spots. And what that will do is I've found a lot of fish will enjoy getting into those high flow areas, and they'll burn off a lot of energy. And so they kind of get a calmer fish because they are going and swimming in the current, and then they're coming back out and just kind of, enjoying life, if you will. But I'll pass that over to Ed to see what he's got to add on to that.
Yeah, the only, that's a lot of fish, and I know you've probably heard a million times line of sight breaks. That's another thing you can always throw in there, just in case. Like when I added this red devil to my cichlid 200-gallon tank, I had to add another piece of wood. So now I have 3 big pieces of wood in there, and that's helped a lot because now they can hide around a couple extra spots because I had 4 big cichlids in there, and now there's 3 logs, so they pretty much can all stay away from each other.
Absolutely. So I'm going to jump over here to the other screen and get these super chats and gifted memberships and things, and then I'll jump back over. I see Rayleigh's got a question there, and I'll be right to that. Here we go. Jeff H. Been a member for 7 months using that membership milestone super chat. Thank you for that. Jeff says, howdy, fishy people. See you guys next weekend. Jeff, I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be so much fun. And then the year kind of settles down, but the week after I get back from Aquashella, start moving tanks and moving all the things. So the fish shows settle down, but life is going to kick into high gear for me, but it'll be so much fun. Mark Sturlson, thank you so much. You're very, very awesome. Gifted 5 Fish Room Fever memberships. So this would be a great time for those of you that were gifted a membership to come hang out Sunday, for free, kind of check out the behind the scenes stuff. And a huge thank you to Mark for doing that. Mark's doing that almost every week. Mark's a crazy guy. Good day and thank you, Mark, very much. I missed Rack. He was in here. Rack Cross Studio, our buddy there with $5 super chat, says, can't stay, gonna pay. Well, Rack, if you do come back and catch the replay, thank you, brother. I very much appreciate it. I'm really enjoying watching you doing the Rack Cross Studio thing along with Bird Garden and Pond Life. It's very inspiring how you get I won't say you don't get the time, but how you make all of that work together with those 3 channels. Thank you so much, Rack. Oink Master Supreme Forever. Oinky, I'm sorry I didn't get to see you this past week. Using the membership milestone super chat, says, ever had Hong Soy Apisto and Nigerian crib together? I have not. and I can't honestly, and I'm not saying it's not been done, but I can't honestly specifically recount talking to a person or seeing a video or hearing a conversation at a club meet or anything like that regarding those two specific fish. So I can't even give you a secondhand recounting of what somebody has mentioned in the past to me before. What about you, Ed?
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And I honestly, I would have to do like what I do with a lot of my fish if I'm looking at something for the first time is I would pull up the chart on A and the chart on B, look at those two fish, sizes, behaviors, temp requirements, all that stuff, and just kind of look at them and go, what's the compatibility level? What's the aggression level? Are they both in the same area? And you can do that, like I said, anytime you're trying to mix things together that you maybe haven't before. And they don't have to match exactly, is the advice I would give. In my experience and opinion, they don't have to match. So, like a lot of times you'll say, where it says this fish wants water between 72 and 80. Well, and this fish wants water between 76 and 84. Well, you've got that overlap. You've got that middle area that they're both okay in. Theoretically, sometimes those charts can be a little off. But theoretically, you've got that overlap of those several degrees to which is compatible for both of those fish. So when you're looking to try and mix things, keep in mind, just because they both don't have a temperature range of 72 to 80 doesn't mean they don't have an overlapping variance or an overlapping range there within those two variances that you can have them at.
Yep.
So sorry, I don't have a good answer for you there, Winky. I apologize, but
that was
always thanks for your love.
That was a great way to look at it, though.
Oh, well, thank you. Leslie Perry with $5 super chat says, please explain almond leaves to me. I put one in my betta tank for tannins, but what else do they do? Answer was 5 years. Hold on a second. There we go. Answer is if I was 5 years old. LOL. Thanks. All right. Well, first off, Leslie, thank you so much for the super chat and being a member. All of you awesome people being members as well. Very much appreciate it. So, my pitch for Indian almond leaves, I guess, is how I'll do this for a 5-year-old, as you said. Aside from tannins, Indian almond leaves or catappa leaves have also been found to have some really other good healing properties, some antibacterial properties, a lot of positives in terms of keeping fish healthier and kind of helping to keep them, well, healthier. So the other thing is when you have not just Indian almond leaves, but this is going to apply to other botanicals. When you have those organics in the tank, they break down. They dissolve. They become organic waste. As those things break down, or I guess you could say part of what causes those things to break down, a little bit of both. You get different microorganisms. You get biofilms that develop. You get this whole little ecosystem that kind of revolves around the organics or the leaves or whatever kind of nut you pick or things like that breaking down. So as we mentioned, the tannins are one thing. One, it gives the dark water too that tends to drop your pH when you're using it in proportion to the volume of water. But you also get those healing / helpful properties from specifically catappa leaves or Indian almond leaves to help keep your fish a little bit healthier. You then get into what I do a lot with shrimp, which is oftentimes with my shrimp, if I don't want the tannins and I don't want the pH fluctuation, is I'll boil a lot of that out or I'll soak a lot of that out. And then I'll put it in there strictly as a quote unquote sterile organic matter. So it's simply something I'm putting into the tank specifically so that it can break down and provide those little microorganisms and things. So there are a lot of different uses for catappa leaves and other leaves as well. But I do find that Indian almond leaves have the most benefits, especially since some of those other properties they have. I hope that was a clear and concise breakdown on that. I'm going to grab this real quick because I just saw it pop on the other screen. The Zen Ginger member for 30 months on Team Zebra. Thank you so much, Zenny. And of course, an awesome moderator. And she's been doing some behind the scenes work on the channel, doing some changes on descriptions and stuff like that. So we appreciate the help there. Says, I'll just leave this right here. 2.5 years. How does the time fly so fast? Hashtag Team Zebra. It's amazing. I don't know where it went, but I'm grateful that I've gotten to spend the time with you all that I have, and that we've got many more years to come, and that we're getting on a whole new leg of the adventure onto the new property, building the fish room and all that fun stuff to come. So, all right. I know I jumped over to Zen's real quick. Did you have anything you wanted to add on the leaves before I grab Rayleigh's question?
I was going to do more of the 5-year-old thing. Like when you make coffee or tea, you put beans or leaves in there, and then you taste it, and you can taste the flavor of those beans in the water. Well, and then like if you have green tea, it's supposed to give special minerals to your head. So it's just the same way with those leaves. It's basically making a tea that's healthy for the fish in the tank.
There you go.
That was my super easy version.
That's a good one. I love it. Bravo to you. That was better than mine.
No,
right,
yours
so really
was...
entertainment. Oh, no, it's fine. Had a question here. I saw you ask this over in the KG stream. Really Entertainment says, hey, first time viewer here. So thank you for that. Very much appreciate it. I hope you're still hanging out. Sorry it took a little while to get to it. It says, what are your thoughts on wave makers versus air stones? I don't see much freshwater guys using wave makers. So I'm going to not technically differentiate between wave makers and power heads because they are kind of two different things, technically speaking. And I'm just going to answer that is with power heads because that's what I use. For anybody that's like, well, what the heck's the difference? Wave makers, you tend to have some controllability to it, so they pulsate, or you can make them oscillate like Ed's doing there. He's not a swimmy shark, but you tend to have some sort of variance in the oscillation or the on-off of that fan, so that it's sending out pulses or going different directions, and it's actually causing that surface agitation. Whereas power heads, it's typically you plug it in, you point it in a direction, it stays that direction, it stays the same volume of water moving at the same speed constantly and consistently. I will say I have used power heads a lot in freshwater stuff, and actually we talked about it in one of the other questions with adding some areas for high flow for fish to swim into. The big reason, if we're going to compare and contrast with air stones, that I wouldn't see it to be as efficient or valuable for myself is the quantity of tanks. So with me, if I've got, like right now, I've got 15 or 18, however many I've got at the moment. But when I get back up to 100 plus tanks and even more with the new build, where we're looking at several thousands of gallons of water, it doesn't make sense for me to purchase, even let's say we'll go Amazon cheap, $15 a wave maker or a power head. We got the most knockoff power head we could on Amazon. We put one in each tank. If I've got to spend $15 on 100 tanks, that's a lot of money. The other thing is that's a lot of power outlets that I have to have open for those to plug into, and then that's a lot of draw on electricity with that many things plugged in. Now, yes, you could say, well, it's I don't even know what the wattage of a standard power head / wave maker would be. But let's just say it's 15 watts. You could say, well, that's a 15 watt power head you've got in there, so that is working like a 15 watt heater. So yeah, you could kind of play it into that. But for me, it just makes more sense. I have a linear air pump from Aquarium Co-op. Like right now, these are on smaller air pumps because I didn't want to run the line from the other rooms into here, knowing that I'd be moving. But it just makes more sense that I can drop air stones in for surface agitation a lot easier and more cost efficiently than I can drop wave makers in. I definitely like when we get the 220 set up at the new place with the Promise. You'll see that I've got power heads running in that. A lot of bigger tanks with bigger fish / sometimes more aggressive fish. You'll see that I run power heads in there. Another thing I think that plays into it would be the types of fish. If you've got fish, like say lots of guppies, Ed's got tons of guppies. I've got quite a few guppies at this point, but not nearly as many as our buddy Ed there. A lot of times, A, they can't fight the current on those, and B, you run the risk of them getting like sucked into the side grill of it, especially if they get, excuse me, if they've got, like really long finnage. They're not really a fast mover anyways, and then they swim by and they've got this really big fin, and they just kind of get sucked onto the side of it. The same thing with fry. It's real easy for fry to get pulled into those things. So I think that's, those maybe some specific examples, but multiply that out into, like lots of tetras and stuff, lots of smaller fish, things like that. I think that there are definitely more places in the freshwater side of things, because I've done salt and fresh and enjoy them both thoroughly. I think there are more places that we definitely could utilize powerheads and wave makers. But I don't think that they are necessarily, in the ways that I use them and at the quantities I use them, a viable replacement to go, I'm going to put wave makers instead of air stunt. My filtration is sponge filters. And yeah, I know that you can, like the Copes, their power head is specifically designed to go into a sponge filter. But I don't see it as being viable for me. Maybe if I had 1 or 2 tanks, in those specific tanks I wanted to have higher flow, absolutely. Now, could both do the same thing in terms of surface agitation and a gas exchange? 100%. So I hope that was a good clarification. I know once again that was a little long-winded, but I'm going to be running through here real quick. No, you can't. Oh. Behind me yells at me if I go over my time. Yeah, buddy, go ahead.
Also, well, I like the power heads in my long tanks because I put them next to my heater. Because what you're doing is you're going to be casting the warm water through the tank, and your heater's not going to have to work as hard. And it saves your heater just a tremendous amount of life if you can just keep the water flow going instead of having to have it, 2 separate ones burning at both ends. If you throw a good power head in there, it'll be great. One time James was over here and we hooked up a great big powerful one that I had, and it blew every fish to the side. It was hilarious. But I put a smaller one in the next day, and after that, I had these swordtails that would not breed for the first guy who had them, and then I got them because he didn't want them anymore, and they started breeding. I had them for almost 5 months, and they never bred. And I was like, this is the weirdest thing. I've never had swordtails not breed. As soon as I put that power head in there, they started breeding, and they haven't stopped. They just love that flow. It's just different strokes for different fish. It's crazy.
Absolutely. All right, I'm going to see if I can burn through as many of these as possible here in the next 7 minutes. Real quick, HSPS's Tank Tribe, thank you so much for that $1 super sticker with that big brown pile of poo fertilizing the plants in the stream. Appreciate you very much for that. Any Halix says, longtime fish keeper, but first time venturing into cichlids. I hope you enjoy it. I'm not real big on the African cichlids. Mrs. Fever is, which is going to be nice to give her some room to set up some tanks for some African cichlids at the new place. But I still try and keep a decent knowledge base up, even though I don't really get hands-on with it. But congrats. It's always fun to try new things in the hobby. Stephen White says, I have a 75-gallon well-planted tank with 1 2-inch gold severum. Next week, I'm adding 2 more gold severums and a hero severum. Only 1 gold severum is male. Should they coexist? Okay. I think they should, just in quick and simple answer. What about you, Ed?
Yeah, I mean, I have absolutely fallen in love. I've only had 1 severum my whole life, and I have him. I've been watching him for the whole hour. He's a green spotted one. I absolutely love him. They do like to eat plants. I've been noticing him lots of less. My plants are dwindling away in that tank, and he's getting bigger. He was about that 3 months ago. Now he's like that. Absolutely love him. I wish I could get rid of all my other fish in that tank and have a whole bunch of severins or a bunch of rainbows. But the severins are nice.
I mean, yeah, I think they should do fine. As with any fish, just add them when you have a chance to observe them for a little while that day. Don't mix it and then leave the house for 8 hours because you never know. But add them in there, spend a little bit of time observing, making sure everybody goes well, because Even though a species can act one way, an individual fish can sometimes have a particular attitude or behavior that's not status quo for the species. Which, yeah, should be good in my thoughts there. Gabriel's glass box is asking me dimensions to gallons. I don't know off the top of my head, but I know 100% if you hit Google and do tank dimension calculator, aquarium gallons calculator, that will pull it up right off the bat for you without me incorrectly telling you the gallons there. Big Shrimpin says, are the vinegar eels like the microworms that if you feed too much, it would cause defects? So in quick sum up, as far as I'm aware of, no. That being said, I don't recommend feeding any food singularly, whether that's, the highest quality pellet, flake. I use really extreme Pro Flakes. I've got extreme nano. I've got extreme community crave. I've got extreme pellets in other sizes. Notice there's a lot of variants. I don't recommend feeding just one type of food, regardless of what the food is or how high of a quality the food is, for anything. Now that can vary some when you're trying to raise up, fry for the first week or so, and you're trying to get them up to the next size food, up to the next live food. You've got things that, hey, it's not big enough to eat baby brine shrimp, so we're going to start out with infusoria. Yeah, in those cases, for that small time frame, they may only be grazing on infusoria, or maybe you get some golden pearls to add to it. You've got vinegar eels, but I mix everything up. So throughout the day, I will feed like the fry race. They will get baby brine shrimp twice a day. They will get microworms. They will get, I usually take the extreme nano pellet and I just kind of twist like that and powderize it because it breaks apart really easy if you want it to. I've got my fry food mix that I make. They'll get a variance of things throughout the day. So I've not, and to touch on the microworm defects, I've not personally experienced it, but I do know of betta breeders specifically who have fed microworms only and had that happen, which is why I relay that, hey, somebody else observed this. I haven't personally, but somebody else did observe this, so just a heads up. But I don't even know that to branch across the other nematodes. So microworms versus banana worms versus Walter worms. If it happens with microworms, does it also happen with banana worms and Walter worms? I honestly don't know. But regardless, I always recommend a varied diet as soon as you can feed varying foods to a fish, which most people aren't dealing with really, really, really small fry. But like the baby Danios that I've got over here, they're like the size of an eyelash when they first hatch out. They live primarily on infusoria, and I have a lot of biofilm in the container I raise them in. I do also do a dusting of the Hikari first bites. And then once I feel like they're big enough, I'll try like the vinegar eels because they are a topwater fish. But I'll even do just a little teeny tiniest dab of microworms in there because I also know that some of them do hang out in all the mosses down at the bottom. But I still mix it up even with those little bitty fish. I'm giving multiple options versus just one. I know I said I was going to do quick answers, but that one took a little bit more in depth there. All right, we get back up here. Oh, goodness. This is going to be one of those nights I don't get to answer all the questions. We try our best. We really, really do. There was Leslie's super chat, but all right. As far up as I can get now because it jumped on me. Packers 9404 says, any tips on how to keep driftwood at the bottom of the tank? Currently soaking mine, but not sure how to keep it from floating. Attach it to really big rocks. And I know that can be annoying. I've got 3.5, 4 foot piece of driftwood. And I had that thing attached to some really big rocks for, I don't know, a year, and it still didn't want to sink. Sometimes it just takes forever and ever and ever. Now you can use, depending upon how much you care about what it looks like. I used some of the really thick zip ties, and I went through a couple of natural places in the wood that I could run them through. And then I actually had one rock had kind of a hole in it already that I ran through. and then the other one I actually just drilled a hole with a concrete bit and ran the zip tie through there. So you could do that. You can drill, depending upon how big the driftwood is. You could like drill a piece of slate, a slate slab, or if you've got some rock that would be flat and would work, and it looks good to you. Put a hole in it, run a screw through it, and drill into that. That's how you see a lot of driftwood is mounted when you buy it. It's on a slab like that. But I just, in my experience, depending upon the type of wood, the bigger it is, the longer it's going to take for that thing to stay at the bottom. You have anything you wanted to add to that, buddy?
Yeah, I made a video on how to drill slate and screw it into the bottoms of driftwood. Also, I do like to soak my driftwood before I actually put it in the tank, so that way it's going to be heavier and everything. You're going to leach the tannins out that might make your tank ugly. You can put, you can treat your wood that way. So there's lots of advantages to pre-soaking that'll help it sink. Also, if you've like my aquascape this week, I didn't have time to do any of these things, and I can't put a string around it because it's aquascape. So I literally glued it to a piece of slate and then pushed the stand up, and nobody could see the slate. So
I love it.
Put the rock underneath the wood, or put the rock on top of the wood and make it look natural.
Yeah, there you go. All right, rapid fire here at the last minute, so we're not running into Ed's time because I'm 2 minutes over, but he's scheduled for 3 minutes out. And Ed, if you need to leave it to grab a drink real quick and meet me over there, feel free to do that. But Paulie, good old Paul's Terra was saying made polycarbonate lids for 36 bow front. I've seen you mention that a couple times this week. I do not envy you, my friend. Trying to make any type of lid for a bow front is not fun.
Oh my gosh!
Kudos to you for doing it. Adidas Fendon says, I use Fisher & Fever power head polishers very often. Yeah, so I do love that. Anybody that's not familiar, take a power head, take a bottle of water, cut the bottom off, fill it with polyfill, stick your power head on there. You've got a really super cheap and easy water polisher.
That's awesome.
Bunny Viper says, I drain several tanks when doing water changes, then add dechlorinator to all the tanks before starting a refill. How long is that dechlorinator good as it sits waiting for the refill? It's going to be good long enough for you to do what you need to do. I've often kind of wondered about that in terms of, if I'm doing 20 tanks and I put all of the dechlor in, is it the dechlorinator still valid in the last tank? If I start up here, it's going to be fine. Generally, a lot of times you'll see, and this varies by dechlorinator, but to be quick and hopefully efficient, a lot of times you will see that people mention, like Prime, for example. I use Prime. People will say, well, Prime can affect, a water test, up to 12 hours after you do it or whatnot, or 24 hours. A lot of those have things in them that are designed to bond molecules together or lock stuff up for like a 24-hour period. I don't think in the average scheme of things, if you're doing water changes and you're completing the water changes, at that point in time, you're ever going to run into an issue where your dechlorinator is completely absorbed or no longer functional by the time you get to that tank. Now, if you're doing a water change, you put dechlor in and then you have an emergency and you're at the hospital for 3 days or a week or something, yeah, I'm going to say you're going to need to re-dechlorinate. But I've had times where I dechlorinated a tank. Maybe I didn't fill it all the way up for whatever reason. I was working on something, and then I came back and I just put straight tap water into it, 2 hours later to top it off the other gallon or two, whatever. And I didn't panic because I didn't add fresh dechlorinator. It was fun. Okay. One more minute here. Carlos Diaz has got the 60-gallon Planet with 15 Rominos and 6 long fin skirts. I'm wondering, should I get 10 Golden Wonder Killies or 10 Congo Tetras? Your thoughts, guys. I'm going to go wild and say Killies, just because normally I would say the Tetras.
What were he had? I was thinking I was going to go with the Congos. But what were
That's what I would normally say, but I changed it up. Just because I'm so partial to the Congo Tetras.
You see, the only thing I'm thinking of is Bex painted a beautiful picture of a golden killie, and apparently this killie eats all the guppies in the tank, and he's kind of a jerk. And I never heard of him being that big of jerks, so now I'm kind of afraid of those guys.
Absolutely,
but they're beautiful.
Oh, yeah. All right. I'm going to throw this one out there because it answers a question from earlier. Our awesome friend and moderator, Paul Sotero, says, James, I have cribs on Hong Soya Pistos. Not good in the same tank unless it was huge. They both occupy the lower level of the tank. Cribs can get aggressive spawning, and the Hong Soy are not. So there you go. There's somebody with personal experience to answer that previous question. And a huge thanks to Whips World, that $2 super sticker with the little #1 fox. Appreciate you, Whip. I think I get to see you next week. Yeah, I get to see you and hang out with you. I know I do because you've got to message me when you get there. So that'll be fun. Looking forward to that. A huge thank you to everyone. Sorry I didn't get to all the questions. Nadia, good luck removing duckweed from Java moss. It's about impossible. If you've got the patience to do it, it's probably not worth it by the hour. I have done it to answer that, but it's not fun. It's a lot of, I like to take it in a container of water and just kind of shake it around in there and get all the duckweed loose, and you're spending a lot of time doing that. That's the only way I know to really do it well, is underwater and shake it out. Any other questions or comments, feel free to bring on over to Chattanooga. Ed, you have a craft for tonight, buddy, or are we doing a recap on the Clash?
I think I'm going to be mainly doing a recap. I did do a couple of crafts today that I'll show real quick.
Awesome. I love it. Well, Ed, thank you for being here. Sorry, I bounced a couple minutes over. If you want to head out, I'll meet you right there as soon as I say goodbye. But a huge thank you to Chattanooga Ed, to all of you awesome people for the super chats and super stickers. What am I doing? We'll do the standard goodbye. A huge thank you to all the moderators, members, lurkers, listeners, super chatters, contributors, questioners, commentators, of course, the replay crew. I love you guys. Till next time, keep your fish healthy. Keep yourselves healthy. Don't be afraid to catch yourself a little fish room fever. Go on and check out Chattanooga Ed next.